Rugby, distinguished participants, I would like to begin by thanking the Center for International Strategic Studies for inviting me to speak to this conference on the trends, challenges to, and the stability of the nuclear order of the world. While the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Ms. Tamina Jajwa, has already delivered the keynote address and addressed many of the issues relating to the nuclear order, I would like to devote the next few minutes to some fundamental issues relating to Pakistan's nuclear program and its direction in the context of the emerging nuclear order and where we stand today. So let's begin with what this nuclear order is all about. The New World Order emerged in the political, military, and financial systems, but it was designed by the victors of the Second World War. And this world order was inherently unequal and disadvantageous to the countries of the Third World, which was still under colonial yoke. To the victors went the spoils of war. To cite only one example, the Charter of the United Nations institutionalized inequality amongst member states of the United Nations. The major allied powers awarded to themselves permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council with veto power. And this is the body charged with the primary responsibility for international peace and security, and in recent years has also acquired legislative authority in the sense that all resolutions adopted by the UN Security Council under Chapter 7 become binding on member states. In the economic arena, the Bretton Woods Conference established the World Bank and the IMF and proposed the establishment of the WTO. And in both these organizations, the World Bank and the IMF, the United States and the West continue to exercise almost total control over financial decision making. The same inequilibrium and inequity relates to the nuclear issue. The IAEA was established in 1957 under the so-called Atoms for Peace program, propounded by President Eisenhower of the United States, and to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and to inhibit the use for military purposes. Then came the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1969, which divided the world into two broad categories, namely the nuclear haves and the nuclear haves not. India, Israel, and Pakistan stayed out of the NPT and eventually pushed their way into the nuclear club, as did North Korea many years later in 2006. However, they have not been accepted as legitimate or full members of among the nuclear powers. There are a number of countries in the world which have the capacity and the wherewithal to manufacture nuclear weapons, but have not done so for various reasons, including particularly in the West, the protection provided to them by the US nuclear umbrella. Then there are those like South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, South Korea, who were persuaded or pressurized to give up their nuclear ambitions. After the NPT came the CTBT, which was doomed from the day of its adoption. And I still remember the famous word of the Indian permanent representative that India would not sign the CTBT, and she used the words not now, not ever. Later on, the last nail in the coffin of CTBT was the withdrawal by the United States from the US Senate of this treaty CTBT, because the US administration was certain that it would not be ratified by the US Senate. We still have not started negotiations on FMCT, the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, for reasons which are well known to all of you. And Pakistan has been one of the countries which have opposed the adoption of the FMCT proposed. We have instead proposed an FMT, which would take into consideration the existing nuclear stocks of the various countries of the world as well. And finally, there is the NSG, a nuclear suppliers cartel, which controls the trade of nuclear materials and technology. And Pakistan has sought, as the Foreign Secretary indicated, a criteria-based approach for admission to the NSG, and we are still waiting for that criteria to be agreed upon by the NSG. Now, why did Pakistan acquire nuclear weapons? Pakistan became an overt nuclear power in 1998. And some of our intellectuals, thinkers, and writers continue to have and occasionally express reservations about Pakistan's nuclear status. Let me state that the three things that determine a country's place in the international community are its economic strength, its political clout, and its military might. Pakistan decided to develop nuclear weapons when, after the 1971 disaster and after the 1974 nuclear explosion by India, all of our proposals at the international and the bilateral level, including a nuclear weapon-free zone in South Asia, positive and negative security assurances, simultaneous signing of the NPT with India, mutual inspections, joint declaration for swearing nuclear weapons, and other similar proposals were rebuffed by India. And the international community failed to moderate India's nuclear ambitions. So it was clear to us that we had to stand on our own in the face of a belligerent and nuclear-armed India. The so-called high moral ground of forswearing nuclear weapons, which many suggested to Pakistan, would have disintegrated pretty quickly when confronted with nuclear blackmail. This apprehension about nuclear blackmail was reinforced when, days after the May 1998 nuclear explosions by India, Mr. L.K. Advani, the then Deputy Prime Minister of India, thought it appropriate to issue a threatening statement against Pakistan in an effort to browbeat us. In this context, we also have the recent examples of the treatment meted out to Iraq and to Libya in the form of aggression, regime change, occupation, and the resulting chaos in these countries, as well as the threats of aggression and the imposition of sanctions against Iran before as well as after the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was adopted both by Iran and the 6 parties negotiating with Iran. And despite certification from the IAEA that Iran is implementing the agreement to the letter. But the United States has its own doubts about the validity of this agreement, and President Trump is on record on a number of occasions having stated that this is the worst agreement that the United States has entered into. North Korea, isolated and sanctioned, perhaps sought to forestall a regime change by going nuclear in 2006. And the situation in the Korean Peninsula has become extremely volatile in the wake of recent North Korean nuclear and missile tests, which have agitated the international community, and particularly the rather juvenile but threatening exchanges between the US President and Mr. Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. We can only hope with the international community that sanity will prevail. Let me state that our own missile and nuclear program is designed purely for deterrence and defense. However, it is also true that nuclear weapon states do enjoy an aura of status, prestige, power, and responsibility in the world. And it is for us to have the confidence and the poise to behave as the responsible and established nuclear weapon state that we are, and to play an effective and positive role in the international arena, particularly in the field of disarmament. There has been some talk about Pakistan, that Pakistan keeps changing the definition of minimum credible deterrence. I would like to suggest that deterrence is not a static concept. It keeps evolving as possible adversaries enhance the sophistication of their weapon systems, acquire second strike capabilities, develop new war-fighting doctrines, and raise the bar through the introduction of anti-missile defenses. Deterrence is designed to meet changing or growing threats confronted by the country within the limited means available to it. There are no fixed numbers attached to it, and certainly Pakistan is not engaged in any arms race with any other country. Similar doubts have been expressed about the nuclear doctrine of first use adopted by Pakistan. First use doctrine is espoused as a deterrent by the party which is vulnerable in a conventional conflict. Pakistan thus has a logical justification for adopting this doctrine. But I would also like to refer and to note that the United States, NATO, France, United Kingdom, and Russia all have first use nuclear doctrines. Only China is the only country which has a no first use doctrine, because India, which claims that it has a no first use doctrine, makes a false claim. Indian no first use doctrine is, to my mind, both farcical and hypocritical, since it allows India to use nuclear weapons against even non-nuclear weapon states if India is subjected to an attack even with chemical or biological weapons. So the no first use flies out of the window at the first chemical or biological attack. Mr. Vajpayee, when he was the Prime Minister of India, himself once stated in an unguarded moment that India will not wait to be attacked with nuclear weapons before using its own nuclear arsenal. The development of tactical or theater nuclear weapons by Pakistan to respond to the Indian doctrine of cold start also led to much hue and cry internationally. Pakistan was accused of having lowered the nuclear use threshold. But soon thereafter, when India tested its own tactical nuclear missiles, which it had been developing for a number of years, there was not a whisper from the international community. The debate over counter-force and counter-value weapons revolves around one simple question. Faced with an existential threat, should a country resort to using tactical nuclear weapons against advancing military forces, or should it choose strategic nuclear weapons aimed against civilian populations? To my mind, the answer should be clear. Now we come to the second strike capability and the nuclear triad. Since India has already acquired a second strike capability and a triad of nuclear weapon delivery systems by leasing a nuclear submarine and also going full steam ahead in its program to manufacture its own nuclear submarines, it is my opinion that we should follow suit. India has also already acquired from Israel the Iron Dome anti-ballistic missile defense, the Arrow missiles and the Green Pine radars in its anti-ballistic missile defense systems. It is also developing its own missile defense systems, apart from developing MIRVs, which are multiple independent re-entry vehicles. This leaves us with a choice. Should we leave ourselves totally vulnerable to a nuclear attack, or should we develop our own missile defense or acquire missile defenses and also go in for the development of multiple independent re-entry vehicles to counter Indian missile defense shield? And then there are the canards about Pakistan's nuclear program. One is that Pakistan's nuclear weapons are not safe and might fall into terrorist hands. This falsehood was propagated by one article by Mr. Sean Gregory of Bradford, who gave 3 examples of so-called attacks against Pakistan's nuclear installations. One was an attack in Sargodha on a school bus. Another was an attack in Kamra, again on a school bus. And the third was an attack on civilians coming out of Pakistan Ordnance Factory, which certainly is no place where nuclear weapons are stored. However, the world took him at his word, and we have since been labeled as a state whose nuclear weapons are not secure. Then there is the falsehood that Pakistan has the fastest growing nuclear weapons program in the world, which again is offered without any corroboratory evidence as a truth which is known to the world. And the third one is that Pakistan might sell its nukes off the shelf to some countries or the other. Even after acquiring nuclear weapons, Pakistan has consistently been seeking to ensure that nuclear weapons can either be eliminated or be never used. And the Foreign Secretary referred to the strategic restraint regime that Pakistan has offered to India, which India has rejected. Similarly, in 2001 in Geneva, we offered India a triad for peace and security. And that triad included in its tripod: dispute settlement, strategic restraint regime, and economic cooperation. This proposal was also rejected by India. Instead, the Indians have promoted the concept of a limited war under a nuclear overhang. And some in the Indian political and military circles, including their army chiefs, have spoken about India imposing a limited war on Pakistan without escalating it to disastrous nuclear exchanges. This is either very naive or pure bluster. India should know, and I'm sure that Indian strategists understand, that once a war starts between two nuclear powers, it is not possible to predict the course or foresee the end game. I hope that saner voices will prevail and India will return to the path of a dialogue with Pakistan. Let me conclude by saying and by stressing that we have no reason to be defensive or apologetic about our nuclear weapons and missile development. We do not need anyone's permission or approval to determine our own security and defense requirements. But let me also note that in order to pursue our national objectives, we do need political stability, a better management of our debt burden to escape the debt trap, reduction of our gaping trade deficits, mending our profligate ways, elimination of the flight of capital from the country, reducing dependence on foreign handouts, stabilization and strengthening of the economy, mounting a robust defense of our positions at the international level and in all international fora, countering the allegations of support for extremism and terrorism, and withstanding any international pressure to our nuclear program in return for economic bailouts. I am confident that we have the capacity and the will to do so. I thank you.